The rain beat against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Vance Global Executive Boardroom, blurring the lights of the city below. Harrison Vance, a man whose name could make or break markets with a single signature, stared down at the sprawling metropolis. He was 32, ruthless and entirely consumed by the empire he had built. On the massive mahogany table behind him lay a contract that would supposedly secure his legacy, a $50 million merger with an overseas logistics firm. His trusted business partner, Victor Thorne, tapped his expensive pen against the glass table, flashing a polished, eager smile. Victor had been pushing this deal for months, promising it was the key to global expansion. Harrison felt a strange, cold knot in his stomach, an instinct that had never failed him. He told Victor to leave the documents and give him an hour to clear his head before signing. Needing the sharp bite of the cold air, Harrison took the private elevator down to the street-level plaza. The financial district was bustling with suits and umbrellas, a sea of grey and black. Tucked away in the corner of the square was a small artisan bread stand. Behind the modest display of sourdough and rye stood Clara Linwood. Clara did not belong to the world of high finance, at least not anymore. Her hands were dusted with flour, her apron worn, but her eyes held a sharp, calculating intelligence that the city had tried and failed to extinguish. 3 years ago, she had been a rising financial analyst before a devastating offshore scam wiped out her family's savings and her father's health, forcing her into a life of quiet survival. Harrison approached the stand, mostly to escape the rain under its wide canvas awning. He set his leather briefcase on the small counter and pulled out the thick folder, flipping through the final pages of the merger agreement while he mindlessly ordered a black coffee and a plain croissant. Clara handed him his order, her eyes briefly catching the bright blue logo stamped on the top of his documents. It was a crest of a lion over a silver shield, the emblem of the overseas logistics firm. Her breath hitched. The world seemed to stop spinning for a fraction of a second. She knew that logo. She knew the shell company behind it, the exact same phantom corporation that had destroyed her family. She looked at the man in the tailored suit, recognizing the famous billionaire Harrison Vance from the financial magazine covers. He was about to write a check that would vanish into thin air. Clara did not care for billionaires, but she despised thieves even more. As Harrison reached for his wallet, Clara placed her hand firmly over the folder. "If you sign that, you will lose every cent in exactly 48 hours, she said, her voice steady and clear over the sound of the rain. Harrison froze, his dark eyes snapping up to meet hers. He was used to being feared, respected, or flattered. He was certainly not used to being lectured by a woman selling baked goods on the street. He offered a cold, dismissive smile, assuming she was just another eccentric local. "I appreciate the business advice," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm, "but I think Vance Global can handle its own risk assessment. Just tell me how much I owe you for the coffee." Clara did not back down. She did not shrink under his intimidating glare. Instead, she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a sharp whisper. "The holding company is registered in the Cayman Islands under a proxy name, likely a man named Elias Sterling, who does not exist. The assets listed in Section 4 of your contract are leased, not owned. If you look at the depreciation schedules on page 12, you will see they match a default template used in a Ponzi scheme dismantled 3 years ago. You are buying a hollow shell, Mr. Vance." Harrison felt the air leave his lungs. He stared at her, genuinely shocked. She had rattled off confidential details and financial anomalies that his entire team of highly paid auditors had somehow missed. He snatched the folder back, his mind racing. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Are you corporate espionage? Who sent you?" Clara wiped her hands on her apron, her expression hardening. "No one sent me. I am just someone who knows what a sinking ship looks like, because I was on one. Keep your money in your pocket, Mr. Vance, or do not. It makes no difference to me." She turned her back to him, attending to another customer. Harrison stood in the rain for a long moment, the cold coffee in his hand completely forgotten. He walked straight back to his penthouse office and locked the door. For the next 3 hours, he bypassed his own legal team and ran a private, aggressive trace on the overseas firm using the exact parameters the bread seller had mentioned. Every single word she said was true. The company was a ghost. The assets were fabricated. And worst of all, the internal routing signatures indicated that someone inside his own company had intentionally doctored the risk reports to hide the fraud. The only person with that level of clearance was Victor Thorne. Harrison felt a cold fury wash over him. His closest ally was trying to bleed him dry. He could call the authorities right now, but Victor was slippery. He would hide the money, destroy the evidence, and walk away clean. Harrison needed irrefutable proof. He needed access to Victor's private offshore ledgers, and he needed someone completely off the grid to help him audit the incoming traps. He needed the woman from the plaza. The next morning, a sleek black town car pulled up to the curb just as Clara was setting up her bread stand. The back door opened, and Harrison stepped out, looking even more imposing in the morning light. He walked up to her, ignoring the stares of the morning commuters. "You saved my empire yesterday," he said, his voice stripped of the arrogance from the day before. Clara did not stop arranging her loaves. "I gave you a warning. You saved yourself by listening. Now please move, you are blocking my display." Harrison chuckled, a rare, genuine sound that surprised even him. He pulled a pristine envelope from his coat pocket and placed it on the counter. "Inside is a check for $500,000. Consider it a consulting fee for yesterday." Clara looked at the envelope, her jaw tightening. She needed that money more than anything. It could pay for her father's treatments. It could buy back their old house. But she knew how men like him operated. Money was a leash. She pushed the envelope back across the counter. "I do not want your money. I did it because I hate parasites, not because I wanted a reward." Harrison watched her, a newfound respect burning in his chest. She was completely immune to his wealth. "Good," he said, leaning against the counter, "because I do not just want to give you a reward. I want to offer you a job. The man who orchestrated this fraud is my own partner. I am going to destroy him, but I cannot use anyone in my company to do it. The system is compromised. I need someone brilliant, invisible, and completely outside his radar to help me tear his network apart from the inside." Clara laughed dryly. "And you want me? A bread seller?" "I want the woman who outsmarted a team of Ivy League auditors in 60 seconds, Harrison corrected smoothly. "I am hosting a massive corporate gala this weekend. Victor will be there, finalizing deals with his shady investors. I need you on my arm pretending to be my new executive consultant, and for the sake of appearances, my personal interest. It will give you the clearance to access the private server rooms during the event." Clara stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was dangerous. It was insane. But the thought of taking down a financial predator, the exact kind of monster who had ruined her life, sparked a fire in her soul she thought had died long ago. "I will do it," she said softly, her eyes locking onto his with fierce determination. "But we do this my way. I am not your assistant and I am not your employee. We are equals in this, or you can find yourself another fake date." Harrison felt a strange thrill race through his blood. He extended his hand over the counter. "For equals it is, Miss Linwood." When Clara arrived at the Vance Global penthouse 2 days later for the gala preparations, she felt like she was stepping onto an alien planet. The sheer opulence of the world Harrison commanded was suffocating. Racks of designer gowns, diamond jewelry, and elite stylists were waiting for her. Harrison stood by the window, watching her take in the room. He expected her to be overwhelmed, perhaps even greedy. Instead, she walked past the diamonds and picked out a simple, elegant black dress, entirely ignoring the exorbitant price tags. As she emerged from the dressing room later that evening, the heavy silk contouring her figure perfectly, Harrison felt the breath knocked out of his lungs for the second time since meeting her. She did not look like a street vendor. She looked like she owned the building. As they walked into the grand ballroom together, flashbulbs erupted. The elite of the city whispered behind champagne glasses, wondering who the mysterious, stunning woman on the arm of the untouchable Harrison Vance could be. And standing by the bar, watching them with narrowed, suspicious eyes, was Victor Thorne, completely unaware that his downfall had just walked through the door. The string quartet played a sweeping melody that echoed against the vaulted ceilings of the ballroom, but Clara could only hear the rushing of her own pulse. Harrison kept a firm, reassuring hand on the small of her back as they navigated the sea of silk and tailored suits. He introduced her simply as a consultant, letting her natural poise do the rest of the talking. It did not take long for the shark to circle. Victor Thorne emerged from the crowd, his smile too wide and his eyes cold as they dragged over Clara. He offered a glass of champagne, his voice dripping with false charm as he asked which firm she had previously graced with her talents. Clara accepted the glass, her expression perfectly composed. She told him she specialized in identifying structural decay in overvalued assets, staring directly into his eyes. For a fraction of a second, Victor's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine unease before he excused himself to greet an investor. Harrison leaned in close, his lips brushing the shell of her ear as he pretended to whisper an intimacy. "He smells blood," Harrison murmured, his voice sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. "It is time." While Harrison engaged the board of directors in a loud, distracting debate about quarterly projections, Clara slipped through the heavy velvet curtains near the service elevators. Using the cloned keycard Harrison had provided, she bypassed the security detail and slipped into the temperature-controlled server room. The hum of the massive hard drives masked the sound of her quick, shallow breathing. She plugged in the encrypted drive and began bypassing the secondary firewalls, just as they had practiced. Lines of code and financial ledgers scrolled across the screen, illuminating her face in a pale blue glow. She found the offshore accounts easily enough, confirming Victor was siphoning millions from Vance Global. But as she dug deeper into the routing history to secure the ironclad proof Harrison needed, a specific sequence of numbers caught her eye. It was a routing code she had memorized years ago, burned into her mind during endless nights of crying and legal battles. She clicked the file. A list of shell companies appeared, and right in the center was the exact dummy corporation that had defrauded her father and destroyed her family. The door clicked open and Harrison slipped inside, locking it behind him. "We have 3 minutes before the patrol loops back," he said, his tone urgent. But Clara did not move. Her hands were shaking violently over the keyboard. Harrison stepped closer, his brow furrowing as he noticed her pale, stricken face. When he looked at the screen, he did not understand the significance of the highlighted name until Clara finally spoke, her voice cracking under the weight of a years-old grief. "It was him," she whispered, tears finally spilling over her lashes. "Victor did not just try to steal from you. 3 years ago, he was the phantom broker who wiped out my father's pension. He ruined my family. He forced us onto the street." Harrison felt the air leave the room. He looked from the screen to the woman trembling beside him. The puzzle pieces snapped together with horrifying clarity. She had not just recognized a random scam at the bread stand. She had recognized the ghost that haunted her life. A heavy, suffocating silence fell between them. The download finished, the drive flashing green, but the victory tasted like ash. Clara snatched the drive, pushing past him without another word. She kept her composure through the lobby and into the waiting car, but the drive back to her modest apartment was completely silent. She was trapped in the past, her walls slamming back up, shutting Harrison out completely. For the next 3 days, Clara did not return his calls. She went back to her bread stand, hiding in the exhaustion of the physical labor, trying to forget the world of penthouses and corporate warfare. She expected Harrison to send his lawyers, or perhaps a massive check to buy her silence and take the evidence. Instead, on the 4th morning, just as the sun was rising over the damp city streets, she found him standing by her cart. He was not wearing a tailored suit. He wore a simple sweater and jeans, and in his hands he carried a heavy imported sack of the exact rare organic flour she used for her sourdough, something she had mentioned in passing weeks ago. He set it down gently, then handed her a thick manila folder. It was not money. It was a comprehensive medical portfolio. He had quietly arranged for the top neurological specialist in the country to take over her father's care, fully funded, anonymous, and strings-free. "I did not know, Clara," he said quietly, the arrogance completely stripped from his voice. "And I am not asking for forgiveness for the world I brought you back into. I'm just asking you not to face it alone." Clara looked at the man who had everything, realizing he was offering her the one thing she had forgotten how to accept, a true partnership, A fragile warmth bloomed in her chest, melting the ice that had surrounded her heart for years. But miles away, in the glass fortress of Vance Global, the fragile peace was already shattering. Victor Thorne sat at his desk, staring at a security alert that had been delayed by a clever algorithm. Someone had breached his private server. He pulled up the encrypted security footage from the gala, zooming in on the dark hallway outside the server room. The camera caught a clear reflection of Clara in a decorative mirror. A cold, venomous smile spread across Victor's face as he ran her image through a private database, recognizing the daughter of the man he had ruined years ago. The game was far from over. The fragile peace did not last long. By noon the next day, Harrison received an emergency summons to the Vance Global headquarters. Victor had called a sudden, unannounced meeting with the entire board of directors and the primary international investors. When Harrison pushed open the heavy mahogany doors of the boardroom, Victor was already standing at the head of the table, projecting a series of doctored financial statements onto the massive screen. He painted a masterful, venomous lie, claiming that Harrison was the one siphoning company funds to finance the lavish lifestyle of a street vendor he had taken in as a mistress. Victor demanded an immediate vote of no confidence to remove Harrison as chief executive officer. The room erupted in anxious murmurs. Harrison remained perfectly calm, leaning against the doorframe, waiting for his cue. He did not have to wait long. The doors opened again, and Clara stepped into the room. She was not wearing a designer gown this time. She wore a sharp, tailored business suit, holding a thick, bound dossier in her hands. Victor laughed, a harsh, mocking sound, asking security to remove the distressed baker from the premises. But Clara did not flinch. She walked straight to the center of the table and dropped the dossier with a heavy thud. She looked directly into the eyes of the board members and began to speak. Her voice was steady, commanding the room with the authority of the brilliant financial analyst she had always been. She detailed the exact routing numbers, the Cayman Island shell companies, and the proxy signatures. She explained how the offshore accounts linked back to a private trust owned entirely by Victor Thorne. She did not just expose his current theft against Vance Global. She exposed the historic fraud he had committed against countless families, including her own. Victor stood frozen, his face draining of color, as the board members flipped through the irrefutable evidence. He scrambled for an excuse, his voice rising in panic as he tried to shift the blame, but his allies were already turning away in disgust. The heavy doors opened a third time. Federal investigators, whom Harrison had quietly contacted at dawn, walked in with a warrant. The room watched in stunned silence as the once powerful Victor Thorne was stripped of his authority and escorted out in handcuffs, his legacy reduced to dust in a matter of minutes. When the chaos finally cleared and the boardroom emptied, Harrison and Clara were left alone in the quiet expanse of the glass tower. The city stretched out below them, no longer a battlefield, but just a city. Harrison closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. He looked into her eyes, stripping away the billionaire facade completely. He told her that he had spent his entire life building an empire of glass and steel, but none of it felt real, until she stood in front of him in the rain. He did not want a contract, and he did not want a business arrangement. He asked for her heart, promising to protect it with every breath he had. Clara looked at the man who had helped her reclaim her voice, and for the first time in years, she let herself trust completely. She pulled him close, sealing their new reality with a kiss that wiped away the ghosts of their pasts. A year later, the financial district buzzed with a different kind of energy. Clara stood on the steps of a beautiful, newly renovated brick building. The sign above the door read Linwood Financial Recovery, a specialized firm dedicated to helping victims of corporate fraud reclaim their stolen assets. Harrison stood by her side, his arm wrapped warmly around her waist. He had stepped back from the daily grind of his own company to help her build her dream, merging their worlds into something far more meaningful than simple wealth. They watched the morning sun reflect off the glass buildings, ready to face whatever the future held together. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear a good story about love and justice. Subscribe to the channel to follow the next stories. We will see you next time.
The comprehensive analysis of Harrison and Clara's transformative narrative begins with a focus on the dual forces of truth and redemption. exploring how the exposure of fraud can become a catalyst for healing the past through the powerful partnership they forge. This exploration starts with a dedicated character study of Harrison Vance, illustrating the profound isolation of success that can accompany immense corporate power. The visualization frames him in his expansive, high-rise boardroom, a setting that emphasizes his focus on empire over personal connection. He has dedicated his entire life to building a vast corporate kingdom, yet this singular pursuit has marooned him. He is a man of intense focus and ambition, but he has learned to distrust everyone, leaving him profoundly isolated in his corner office high above the sprawling metropolis below. This state of emotional void underscores the story's critical initial lesson that wealth completely devoid of genuine human connection is merely a refined and opulent form of isolation. At the opposing pole, the analysis presents the resilience of survival, perfectly embodied through the figure of Clara Linwood. Clara's current station in life is defined not by defeat but by agency. She stands at a modest artisan bread stand, her hands dusted with flour, a stark visual contrast to Harrison's tailored world. This is a path of quiet survival she chose after a devastating offshore scam wiped out her family's savings and her father's health. Clara does not desire a reward, and she despises parasites, two defining characteristics that demonstrate her unwavering dignity. The core of the narrative's conflict is analyzed as the complex structure of betrayal, engineered with complex malice by Victor Thorne. The visualization depicts how Victor has used his position as Harrison's trusted partner to systematically siphon massive capital from Vance Global through a complex web of offshore shell companies and phantom corporations. His entire operation is visualized as a masterclass in predatory finance, presenting a hollow shell of a merger to Harrison. Victor's actions are a stark, visual illustration of how uncontrolled greed can systematically exploit the very trust that underpins a partnership. The analytical key to unraveling this deception is described as the analyst's gaze. The visualization emphasizes how accurate, truthfully understood information is the most potent weapon one can possess in a world of complex deception. While a whole team of Ivy League auditors missed the signals, Clara has the specialized, pattern recognition skills born of personal trauma to identify the exact fraudulent codes of the phantom corporation that destroyed her own family. She warns Harrison of the sinkhole on page 12, providing the precise parameters needed to run his own private trace that confirms every word she said. This leads directly to the next critical phase, constructing a new partnership. The visualization frames this not as simple corporate espionage, but as a critical evolution that shifts the relationship from isolated control to one of true collaboration. Harrison must strip away his billionaire facade and approach Clara not as someone to be paid off, but as an equal. The visualization emphasizes how mutual respect and genuine equality create a true partnership where information flows freely. It was this true collaboration that allowed for the acceptance of vulnerability and mutual strength. This cooperative dynamic is what enabled their high-stakes server room operation, which visualizes the lesson that true strength resides in trust. Genuine partnership must be built on vulnerability and shared purpose, not just corporate espionage. Their shared journey concludes in the ultimate arena of corporate warfare, visualized as the decisive boardroom encounter where justice and consequences are executed. The visualization frames a scene empty of allies for Victor, and instead features federal investigators armed with a warrant, illustrating that justice, while sometimes delayed, is necessary to restore balance. With Victor stripped of authority and handcuffed, the visualization transitions to a final resolution of redemption and a new beginning. Harrison, having been humbled, discovers that purpose is more valuable than simple success. He invests not in his empire, but in Clara's dream, Linwood financial recovery. This final act of humility, visualized as a heavy sack of rare flour and an anonymous, fund-free medical portfolio for her father, teaches the powerful billionaire his last lesson, that true legacy is not a contract, but protecting a partner's heart. They finally walk away from the glass tower as true equals, ready to face the future together with integrity.